The digital camera blurs the lines of the technological divide that existed between film and video games. It puts the cinema, thought to be a wholly organic moving image captured onto film, into the same realm as the imaginary and digitally crafted video game. However, whilst the philosophical implications of this are often focused on, it is perhaps more interesting to observe why the two are still entirely separate mediums. Whilst film continues to be generally acknowledged to the average filmgoer as a narrative medium, video games on the other hand seem to sometimes mimic film, but often as a means to mimic a true virtual reality. The video game's imitation of the digital film is most widely observed in the majority of video games' pursuit of narrative. To be more specific, this means cutscenes. Cutscenes are part of a game where the gamer themselves is no longer able to control the camera or any of the characters, and instead watches a series of cinematic frames that serve the purpose of furthering the story and keeping the viewer interested whilst this happens. Cutscenes have evolved from pre-recorded full-motion videos, also known as FMVs, to now often in-game cutscenes, where the action cuts seamlessly from gameplay to scripted scenes. Cutscenes allowed video games to use cinematic methods to create a narrative over games that would otherwise be simply objectives with little or no meaning. They've often relied on this to try to encourage gamers to feel a connection to the world and the characters around them, therefore heightening the experience of playing the game. Video games have long tried to find ways around cutscenes and seem to be getting to a point where this is perhaps succeeding. Throughout the history of games, many techniques have been tried to avoid the non-interactive cutscene, such as quick-time events where the player has to time button presses to progress the scene. Other techniques include set-piece action sequences, or allowing the player to approach their objective in different ways, giving a sense of freedom. This highlights a fundamental difference of goals between cinema and video games. As games progress, they are pushing more and more to creating true virtual realities that players can create their own stories in. As technology progresses, video games are beginning to focus on more organic experiences, games in which the worlds are procedurally generated and where the players must survive by collecting resources have led the charge into the next era of virtual reality. By removing all objectives other than to survive and then casting the player on their own, many of these games have found a way to truly allow the player to become their character and decide how they approach these kinds of games. But will games now shed their cinematic skin as they come closer and closer to authentic virtual realities? This is unlikely. The impact of cinema on games is too great for us to ever see a complete shift away from the classic linear style. Many games may now move away from it, but there will always be some willing to use the old formula. Whether it is for nostalgia's sake or simply because it is a tried and tested method to create enjoyable game experiences, cinema's influence on video games will probably still show many years into the future, even as video games progress into the virtual realities that they have always strived to become.